Every ending is a beautiful neon requiem, a glowing tribute to the path we've walked and the lessons we've learned. Join us as we close this chapter and prepare for the next big reveal. Hit subscribe now and witness the beauty of a perfect resolution.
My mother-in-law was standing in the doorway of my own home, wearing my cardigan, the cream cashmere one I'd bought myself for my 30th birthday. And she looked at me like I was a stranger who had wandered into the wrong building. "We're settled in," she said. "You should find somewhere else tonight. A hotel. You can afford it." Then she closed the door. I stood in the hallway of the house I had purchased with my own money, my overnight bag still on my shoulder, my keys in my hand, and I could not move. Not because I was weak, not because I didn't know what to do. I stood there because in that moment I understood, with complete clarity, that if I screamed or kicked that door or called the police right then, I would lose everything. Not the house, everything else. The evidence, the advantage. The case I had already started building 6 months ago without them knowing, so I took a breath. I turned around and I walked back to the elevator. Let me back up. My name is non-important. What's important is this. I am 31 years old. I am a licensed occupational therapist, and 3 years ago I bought a 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. I paid the down payment myself. I signed the mortgage myself. Only my name is on the deed. I did this because I had spent the previous 5 years watching every dollar, skipping vacations, driving a car with a cracked dashboard, eating lunch at my desk every single day. I did this because my own parents had nothing to leave me, and I was determined to build something solid from nothing. My husband knew about the house before we got married. He was proud of me. He said so. His family was a different story. My mother-in-law had made it clear from the first holiday dinner that she found me impressive in the way people find something slightly threatening. She would say, "She's so independent," in a tone that made independence sound like a character flaw. My father-in-law was quieter about it, but he followed her lead in everything. And then there was my sister-in-law, Danielle. Danielle was 26, had never held a job for longer than 4 months, and was, at the time this story begins, 8 months pregnant and recently separated from the baby's father. She needed somewhere to stay. And apparently, without asking me, my husband had told his mother that maybe, just for a little while, Danielle could come stay with us. I found out about this conversation not from my husband, but from my mother-in-law, who called me on a Tuesday afternoon to let me know that she and my father-in-law would be bringing Danielle over on Friday and that they would all be staying through the birth and a little after. Just to help. I said that wasn't possible. She said, "It's family." I said, "I understand, but this is my house and I need to be consulted before decisions like this are made." There was a pause. Then she said, very calmly, "Sweetheart, that house is your husband's home. You two are married." He already said yes. I want to stop here and explain something about my husband because he is not the villain of this story. Or at least, he didn't start out that way. He was conflict avoidant in the way that youngest children raised by domineering mothers sometimes are. He said yes to things to end the discomfort of the moment and dealt with the consequences later. He had said yes to his mother without thinking it through, without asking me, and when I confronted him about it, he looked genuinely regretful. He apologized. He said he would call his mother and fix it. He did not call his mother and fix it. Instead, over the following weeks, the plan expanded. It was no longer just Danielle. It was Danielle plus his parents because his mother said she needed to be there when the baby came. It was no longer through the birth. It was open-ended. And every time I raised an objection, my husband found a reason why this particular objection wasn't worth fighting over right now. "She's almost due. My mom is stressed. Can we just get through this one thing?" I kept a record of every conversation. I had started doing this around week 2 when my mother-in-law made an offhand comment about when we redecorate the guest room, plural, we, future tense, as if she were already a resident, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I am a methodical person by nature. I started a notes app entry dated and time-stamped every time something was said that struck me as off. I didn't know yet what I was building toward. I just knew I needed to remember exactly what happened. They arrived on a Thursday, not a Friday. No notice. I was at work. My husband texted me mid-morning, "Mom and Dad and Danny are here. They came a day early. Hope that's okay." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I texted back, "We'll talk tonight." When I came home that evening, my mother-in-law had rearranged the kitchen. Not reorganized, rearranged. The coffee maker I used every morning had been moved to a low cabinet. My cast iron pan, which I had seasoned for 2 years, was soaking in soapy water. The shelf where I kept my cookbooks had been cleared and restocked with her things. She had also, at some point during the day, gone into my bedroom and taken a cardigan from my closet to wear because she said she was cold. I stood in my own kitchen and looked at my things displaced and redistributed, and I thought, this is intentional. This is not thoughtlessness. This is someone establishing that she lives here. I brought it up that night. My mother-in-law cried. My husband asked me to please be patient. My father-in-law said nothing and looked at the floor. And Danielle, sitting on my couch with her feet on my coffee table, said, I don't know why you're making this such a big deal. We're family. I excused myself, went to our bedroom, closed the door, and opened my notes app. The baby was born 5 weeks later. A little girl, healthy, which I was genuinely glad about. I am not a monster. I sent flowers to the hospital. I visited. I held the baby. And in those first 2 weeks after the birth, I kept telling myself that things would normalize soon, that they would start making plans to leave, that my husband would step up. He didn't step up. What happened instead was a slow, deliberate expansion. Danielle's things moved from the guest room into the office. Then a second dresser appeared in the hallway. Then my mother-in-law began referring to rooms in my house by possessive names: Danny's room, our bathroom, the baby's corner. She started receiving mail at my address. A package came addressed to my father-in-law, then a piece of official-looking correspondence that I did not open but photographed, envelope, address, postmark, and added to my file. I had started a proper file by then, not just a notes app, a folder, physical documents and screenshots, a timeline. I had also, quietly, made an appointment with a real estate attorney. The attorney's name was Patricia. She was in her 50s, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and did not waste words. I showed her my deed, my mortgage documents, my payment records, and my folder. She looked at everything, asked me a few questions, and then looked at me over her glasses. You own this property outright as the sole title holder, she said. Your husband has no legal ownership. No one staying in this home has any tenancy rights unless you have a written agreement with them, which you don't. However, she paused. If any of them attempt to establish legal residency, it complicates removal. Mail receipt, duration of stay, certain paper trails. Are any of them receiving mail at your address? I showed her the photographs. She was quiet for a moment. You need to act before this goes further. I want you to send formal written notice today that these individuals are guests, not tenants, and that their stay ends on a specific date. Send it certified. Keep the receipt. And I want you to document everything from this point forward, video if possible, with timestamps. I asked her what I should do if they refused to leave. She said, then we file. I drove home that afternoon with the certified letter drafts in my bag and a date in my head. I would give them 30 days. I would be civil. I would give my husband one more chance to handle this himself. 30 days. I told my husband that evening. I showed him the letter. I told him I needed him to talk to his family and help them make a plan, because in 30 days I would be filing to have them removed if they were still in the house. He stared at the letter for a long time. Then he said, You went to a lawyer without talking to me first. I said, You invited your entire family to live in my house without talking to me first. He didn't have an answer for that. He took the letter into the kitchen and I heard him on the phone with his mother for a long time, their voices low. When he came back, he told me his mother was very hurt. He told me his mother had said some things about me that he didn't want to repeat. He told me he needed some time to think. He slept on the couch that night. I locked the bedroom door, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened my notes app. The next 3 weeks were the kind of quiet that is not actually quiet. Meals where nobody spoke. Rooms cleared when I entered. Danielle nursing the baby in the living room and giving me a look when I walked through, like I was the guest. My mother-in-law asking my husband in front of me whether he needed her to make more room in the office, and my husband saying nothing. Then, on day 22, I came home from a 10-hour shift to find the locks had been changed. Not the front door. The bedroom door. My bedroom, in my house, had a new lock on it, and my things. My clothes, my toiletries, the box under the bed where I kept personal documents and my grandmother's jewelry, had been moved. When I went looking for them, I found them stacked in garbage bags near the back door like luggage at a checkout. My mother-in-law was in the living room. She said, We thought it would be more comfortable for everyone if you used the small room upstairs for a while. I looked at her. I looked at my husband, who was sitting in the armchair and not looking at me. I looked at my belongings in garbage bags, and here is what I did not do. I did not scream. I did not scream. I did not touch anything. I did not go upstairs to the small room. I walked back to the front door, picked up my work bag, and I left. I know what you are thinking. I have read the comments on videos like this. Why didn't you call the police right then? Why did you leave? Here's the answer: because I had spent the last 2 months building something and I was not going to blow it up in a moment of emotion. If I had called the police that night, they would have responded to a domestic dispute. Someone would have said something vague. Everyone would have calmed down, and I would have been back in that house in a position of ongoing conflict with no resolution. But if I called Patricia first, and that is exactly what I did, sitting in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes before driving away, I could have officers accompany me to retrieve my property and a court order in hand before they understood what was happening. Patricia answered on the second ring. I told her everything. She said, "Good. You documented the lock change?" I had. I had photographed it before I walked out. She said, "File is ready. I'm submitting first thing tomorrow." I stayed at a hotel that night. One night, I ordered room service. I went through every document in my folder, and I felt, for the first time in months, like I was standing on solid ground. What happened over the next 11 days moved faster than I expected. Patricia filed for an expedited hearing given the circumstances: sole title holder locked out of her own property, personal belongings removed without consent, unauthorized individuals occupying the home. The filing included my deed, my mortgage payment history, the certified letters I had sent and the delivery confirmations, my time-stamped notes going back 6 months, the photographs of the mail they had been receiving, and a video I had taken 2 weeks earlier, calmly, deliberately, with my phone visible and steady, of my mother-in-law telling me that this family needs this house more than you need to control it. I had not realized how significant that video was until Patricia watched it and said, without looking up, "Oh, that's good. The hearing was scheduled. I was told not to contact my husband or anyone in the house in the interim." That was the hardest part. Not the hotel, not the logistics, not even the grief of it, which I was carrying in a quiet compartment somewhere I hadn't fully opened yet. The hardest part was not calling my husband, because, underneath all of it, I still wanted him to come to me. To call. To say he had made a mistake and he was going to fix it. He did call. On day 8. He said his mother had found a lawyer too. He said things were going to get complicated. He said he thought maybe I was overreacting. I said, "I'll see you at the hearing." The morning of the hearing, I arrived with Patricia and a folder I had organized with tabs. My husband sat across the room with his parents' attorney, a man in a rumpled suit who looked like he had been given this case very recently and had not fully read the file. Danielle was not there. She had the baby. The judge was a woman in her early 60s. She asked for documents. Patricia submitted everything. The other attorney submitted, and I am not exaggerating, a handwritten letter from my mother-in-law describing how much she had contributed to the household and how the home felt like a family residence. The judge read it. She set it down. Then she picked up my deed, then the payment records, then the photograph of the mail. Then she watched, in the courtroom, the video of my mother-in-law saying the house was something this family needed. She looked up. She asked the other attorney, "Who is your client's name on the deed?" He said it was a marital home. She said, "I asked whose name is on the deed." He looked at his papers. He said the name, my name. She said, "I have a sole-titled property owner who has been locked out of her own home, her personal belongings removed without consent, and unauthorized occupants who have now retained counsel to argue a claim they have no legal basis for." She paused. "I'm issuing an immediate writ of possession. Law enforcement will accompany the plaintiff to her property today." My husband's face did something I don't have a good word for. His father looked at the table. The other attorney was already gathering papers. The judge wasn't done. She flagged the issue of the mail for follow-up. She noted the duration of the stay in combination with the documented assertions about the home being a family residence as something that should be reviewed in the context of bad faith occupancy. She was precise and unhurried, and she did not raise her voice once. We went back to my house that afternoon with a sheriff's deputy. My mother-in-law opened the door and started to speak, and the deputy explained, very calmly, that they needed to vacate the premises. My father-in-law put his hand on her arm. They left within 2 hours. My husband left too. He took a bag and he went to stay with his parents. He did not say goodbye to me. I watched from the doorway of my own home as he loaded his things into the car, and I thought about every moment I had spent hoping he would be different. And I felt the grief of it move through me like weather. They were gone by 4 o'clock. I stood in my living room alone for the first time in almost 5 months. My cast iron pan had a ring of rust where it had been left soaking. The cardigan I'd never gotten back was presumably still with my mother-in-law. My grandmother's jewelry was intact. I had checked first thing. I sat down on my couch and I did not move for a long time. The legal aftermath took another few months. My husband's family's attorney had apparently advised them that contesting the writ was not worth pursuing given the documentation, so they did not file an appeal. There were separate proceedings related to my marriage that I will not detail here because they are still ongoing and my own attorney has asked me to keep certain specifics private. What I will tell you is what I told the family court mediator when she asked me if there was anything I wished I had done differently. I said, I wish I had trusted my instincts 6 months earlier than I did. The first time something felt wrong, the kitchen being rearranged, the mail arriving, I knew. I told myself I was overreacting. I spent months second-guessing what I could see with my own eyes because I was trying to keep the peace in a situation where the other people involved had no intention of keeping peace with me. She wrote something down. Then she asked, "What made you start keeping records?" I thought about it. My mother-in-law used the word "we" when she talked about my house. The first time she did it, I almost let it go. Something in me said, write it down. So I did. The house is mine. The mortgage is current. The small room upstairs, the one they wanted me to move into, I turned into an office. I have a good lamp in there, and a plant, and on the windowsill I keep a copy of the deed in a clear plastic sleeve, which is probably not a normal thing to have on a windowsill, but it helps me remember what I built and what I protected. Last month, Danielle sent me a message through a mutual contact. She said she wanted me to know she thought what her mother had done was wrong. She said she was sorry. She said she hoped her daughter never ended up in a situation like this. I thought about that for a few days. Then I sent back a short message. I said I appreciated her saying so, and I hoped her daughter had someone in her corner who taught her early that knowing your own name on your own deed was not something to apologize for. I haven't heard back. That's okay. Some doors close and you stand on the right side of them, and that is enough. If you are in something that feels like what I described, the slow erosion, the rearranged kitchen, the word "we" where it doesn't belong, I want you to hear this. You are not overreacting. Write it down. Date it. Trust the part of you that said something is wrong. That part is usually right. And if someone tries to make you feel like protecting what you built is the same thing as being cold or difficult or unloving, remember that you can love people and still hold the line. You can grieve what didn't work and still stand in your own doorway. That is exactly where I am standing. There is a pattern to how people lose what they built, and it almost never starts with a single dramatic moment. It starts with something small being moved. A cardigan taken from a closet. A coffee maker shifted to a lower shelf. A word "we" used in a sentence where it has no business being. Most people hear those things and tell themselves they are overreacting. That is exactly what the people doing it are counting on. What happened in this story followed a logic that had nothing to do with luck and everything to do with choices. Choices made by everyone involved, including me. My mother-in-law did not arrive at my door by accident. She had spent years reading a situation and concluding correctly at the time that the path of least resistance would hold. My husband had spent years learning to smooth things over rather than resolve them, and I had spent months watching and waiting and telling myself that patience was the same thing as wisdom. It is not always. Sometimes patience is just delayed action wearing a more comfortable name. The turn came not from a stroke of fortune but from a decision. The decision to stop managing the discomfort and start building the case. Every note I took, every photograph, every certified letter with a delivery confirmation was an act of discipline in a moment when anger would have been easier. Anger is fast and loud and it feels like power, but it spends itself quickly and leaves very little behind. What I built instead was a record, and a record in a room with a judge, and a deed and a camera-ready video of someone telling me my own house was not mine to control, turned out to be worth considerably more. I want to be honest about what this cost, because stories like this are often told as if the win erases the loss. It does not. I lost a marriage I had believed in. I lost years of trying to fit into a family that had already decided what role I was allowed to play. There is grief in that which does not disappear simply because a writ of possession gets signed and a sheriff's deputy shows up at the door. The grief is real. I have sat with it. I am still sitting with it. But here is what I know on the other side of it. The woman who rearranged my kitchen thought she was dealing with someone who could be managed. She was not wrong to think so. I had given her years of evidence that I could be. What she did not account for was that a person who has built something from nothing, who has signed her own mortgage and paid her own way and put her own name on her own deed, carries a particular kind of clarity about what belongs to her. That clarity does not disappear just because someone moves her coffee maker. It waits, it watches, and when the moment comes, it does not hesitate. Protecting what you built is not a failure of love. Knowing the difference between a guest and an occupant is not coldness. And standing in your own doorway at the end of it, steady, documented, and entirely within your rights is not a small thing. It is in fact the whole thing.